The mother of the struggle for freedom in South Africa has died, aged 81. Winnie Mandela, freedom fighter, political prisoner, icon of the liberation struggle, has passed away unexpectedly at the age of 81. She had been ill since the beginning of the year. I knew Winnie Mandela, and when I knew her, she was a political prisoner. In fact, she had a unique status. She was a banned person. What did that mean? It meant that no person could quote her and no person could refer to her. She was therefore a non-person, right out of the pages of George Orwell's 1984. But that was because, of course, she was indeed a person. She was a mensch. She was a woman and a personality of, for a period of time, unparalleled importance. Her husband, Nelson Mandela, was in the course of a 28-year sentence by the apartheid regime, breaking rocks on Robben Island, then notionally in Pollsmoor Prison and Pollsmoor Hospital. But he was, like her, locked out of the popular discourse, unable to be seen or heard. And this was the way that the apartheid regime dealt with their opponents when they weren't shooting them down dead. But Winnie Mandela, banned or not, was an icon, was a banner, was a flag for the liberation struggle in South Africa. And if you want to know how important she was, take a look at social media this evening. Take a look at the parade of racist finks who are trashing, traducing, insulting, defaming the memory of Winnie Mandela. And if you were able to scroll back, which for them, perhaps it's lucky you cannot, to what their attitude to apartheid was when Winnie Mandela was fighting it in the face of the white supremacist government in South Africa, I know that you would find that most of them hated the idea that the black people, the black majority in South Africa, should have the same rights as white people, should have votes, should be able to choose their own government, their own leadership. She was not a saint. She committed many sins. She even committed a crime or two, mainly in the form of personal corruption, which sadly has afflicted a very great number of the leaders of the ANC. But she never lost her political bearings. Her political bearings were with the masses, not with the new black upper middle class, not with the new breed of comrade multi-millionaires, but with the people of the townships. And if you don't believe me, just watch. Just watch the film over the next day or two from the bottom of South Africa, from the poor masses in South Africa. And you see if I'm not right. You see if there's not an outpouring, an uprising of grief and celebration of the life of Winnie Mandela, who passed away today. That's one of the subjects on the agenda tonight. We have Comrade Brilliant Mahlanga, academic, a researcher and human rights activist at the University of Hertfordshire, talking about that. Now, James Whale was talking about my next subject because great minds think alike. Scotland Yard have announced that it's investigating the 12th murder in London in the last 19 days. 15 people were murdered in London in February, compared with 14 in New York, which has a comparable population. 23 people were killed in London in March, compared to 21 in New York. What's behind this murder epidemic in London? Who's being murdered? Why? And who's doing the murdering. And what is the mayor doing about it? I see a lot of Sadiq Khan in the media, but I never feel him taking this crisis seriously. He can always be relied on to put the boot into Jeremy Corbyn, about whom more later. He can always be relied on to stand up against some kinds of discrimination. He can always be relied on to stand up for, and full marks to him, lesbian and gay people. He can always be relied on, I saw him last doing so, standing up for the rights of transgender people. But what about the rights of the murdered people, Sadiq? What about the rights of their families, their friends, their communities? They're being murdered in industrial quantities. And I don't feel you, Mayor Sadiq. I don't feel any urgency here. Now, he may say, and he'd be right to say, we've got a government that has cut 21,000 police officers. 21,000 police officers. When violent crime is rising, we've got a government that's cutting the number of police officers. That's true, Sadiq. But what are you doing about that? You have the bully pulpit. You can summon the media at the drop of a hat. You've got resources to put into campaigns. Why do I not feel a campaign from you about the murder wave in London? I think it's an important gap in his curriculum vitae, don't you? And we'll be talking about Jeremy Corbyn and about Russia. This Easter weekend, media, news, extravaganza will live in history. Trust me on that. Your children will learn of the Easter of 2018, when the entire news media, alongside their enablers inside the Labour Party, did everything that they could and in concert to destroy the leader of Her Majesty's opposition, to delegitimize him, to mark in the public's mind that this man is not fit not only to be your Prime Minister, but to be the leader of Her Majesty's opposition. As Mr. Macmillan might have put it, it's not one damn thing, it's one damn thing after another. And like the Zinoviev letter of 1924, its intention, that was a fake, forged letter, by the way, purporting to be from the Central Committee of the Comintern in Moscow, a letter from Zinoviev, one of the leaders of the Bolsheviks, to the comrades in the British Labour Party, giving them their marching orders, telling them what they had to do, and in particular in their agitation in the British Armed Forces. It was a forgery. It was a fabrication. It was written, or at least purveyed, by MI6, the British Security Services. It was never written by Zinoviev. It was never received by the Labour Party. It was fraudulent, forged, fake, but it had just one purpose, and that purpose was achieved. It was to destroy Labour's hopes of election in the 1924 general election. And so this delegitimization process, enabled by a fifth column inside the Labour Party, has as its purpose to destroy Labour's hopes in the forthcoming elections, first in a few weeks' time, and then whenever it comes in the general election. And it's just as fake, it's just as fraudulent, it's just as forged. Corbyn in the space of 4 weeks, has been a Czechoslovak spy for money, receiving, and I quote, between £3,000 and £10,000 per week, per meeting, at 1980s prices, for meeting a Czechoslovak spy to betray Britain for money. Then when he asked a half-decent question or two, the kind of question that every journalist in the country should be asking all day and every day about the Skripal affair, he was suddenly not a Czechoslovak spy, but a Kremlin agent, a Kremlin stooge, this time not for money, I presume, though they were never clear about that, but for ideological purposes. This man, you saw him with his Russian hat on. Well, it wasn't a Russian hat, they faked that, but then that was on the BBC. They faked a Russian hat on Jeremy Corbyn and faked him outside the walls of the Kremlin. And then he was an anti-Semite, a man who has stood up against racism for more than 40 years, and I have known him for almost 40 years, who stood up against anti-Semitism for over 40 years, whose mother stood in Cable Street in 1936 to stop the march of the black-shirted fascists of Sir Oswald Mosley, the British Union of Fascists. The clue was in the name. And do you know what the Daily Mail was doing that week? They were putting a banner headline on the front of their newspaper. Hurrah for the black shirts! Do you know what their proprietor was doing at that time? He was posing with Adolf Hitler, his good friend, in Berlin, in his own newspapers. Whilst Corbyn's mother was standing, putting her body, if necessary, her blood, in the way of the Nazis, the British Nazis. Take a look at my film, The Patriot Game. You'll maybe learn something from that. It's a lie! Nothing more than a bright, shining lie that Corbyn is an anti-Semite. It's a lie that Labour is a nest of anti-Semitism. It's a lie with a purpose. At the 1952 Labour Party conference, the right-wing union boss, Will Lawther, shouted at the left-wing leader, Nye Bevan, and his supporters in the conference, "Shut your gob. Shut your gob." That's what they're shouting at Corbyn now, wrapped up and dressed up in interlacing, interlocking, layer after layer of lies. They're shouting at Jeremy Corbyn, "Shut your gob." Shut your gob about Palestine. Shut your gob about war. Shut your gob about socialism. Well, you turn if you want to. I'm with Corbyn.